Good afternoon. Welcome to St. Mary's for our Journeys in Faith quarterly speaker series. I'd like to announce a few coming attractions before I introduce today's speakers. Later this month, on March 30th, we have a speaker coming named Father Samuel Hakim, and he's named after Venerable Father Samuel Mazzucchelli, who's the founder of St. Mary's Church and also a candidate for sainthood. And I invite you to come back on March 30th and learn more about Father Samuel Mazzucchelli, and then we'll also have a tour of St. Mary's Church at the end of that talk. There's a video on St. Mary's homepage at the bottom, a 12-minute video about Father Samuel Mazzucchelli. You can learn more about the man who founded this parish and multiple parishes up and down the Mississippi River in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa. He was quite a Renaissance man. So I encourage you to take a look at that video, come back to hear Father Samuel Hakim's talk about Father Samuel Mazzucchelli. Also on the back of that flyer, there's a promo for a talk coming up the next day, March 31st at St. Wenceslaus Church. Dr. Tim Millay will talk on the topic of the Passion and the Crucifixion of Jesus, a medical, historical, and scriptural analysis. Dr. Tim Millay is part of the St. Thomas Aquinas Guild in the Quad Cities, and he's a friend of mine from the Rockford Fathers of St. Joseph group, and he actually zoomed in on some of our Iowa City meetings during COVID, and so I'll be glad to go hear Father Tim when he comes to speak in Iowa City. You have evaluation forms that you were given. Please fill them out after the talk. I mean, you can put your name on it, but if you fill out your evaluation form, when we go downstairs for the reception, and in fact, the entrance to leave the church or the exit to go downstairs is the far left one as you turn around. So you can go downstairs there, turn in your evaluation form, and you'll get a free cookie and lemonade at the reception. And it really does help us to get suggestions to make this series better. So we appreciate that. Well, my wife is a Creighton University graduate. So you may not have heard, but Creighton beat Iowa by 2 points this afternoon. And we had a bet on the game, and I lost. But I made sure it was something that we would both enjoy, so it was actually a win-win bet. So. Well, when I first came to St. Mary's in 1996, I had 2 young daughters, and I met this very welcoming family that also had 2 young daughters, and were part of the hospitality ministry, Coffee and Donuts, at St. Mary's on Sunday mornings. And at that point, my children thought that coffee and donuts was the third part of the liturgy. You know, there was the liturgy of the Word, liturgy of the Eucharist, coffee and donuts, you know. And so it was just a natural extension of the Mass, was to go down and to be with the people. And we were blessed to meet Bill and Cindy Roush and their daughters who were serving coffee and donuts. And we're blessed again today to have Bill and Jeanette with us to share on the topic of the importance of family and faith community. So please welcome Bill and Jeanette. Father Bill.
I'm not as tall as Dan, so. Well, he took part of my talk from the very beginning. Dan said he and his wife, Janet, joined St. Mary's in, would you say, 1996? And we're blessed to get to know our family as we were involved in the hospitality at Coffee and Donuts after Mass. He also said he remembered my wife, Cindy's mom, being involved at St. Mary's Church before and after the death of my wife, whom I lost to breast cancer in 1997. Dan texted my daughter Jeanette, who edits the St. Mary's newsletter, saying that he felt we had an interesting faith journey and wanted to know if we'd share it with you. So here we are. I would like to start with a reflection by Bishop Barron on the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. This gospel focuses on the faith of 4 men who brought a paraplegic to Jesus for healing. This is just one of the many Bible stories that encourages us to focus on faith. Bishop Robert Barron says faith is an attitude of trust in the presence of God. Faith is openness to what God will reveal, do, and invite. He says it's obvious that in dealing with the infinite, all-powerful person who is God, we are never in control. One of the most fundamental statements of faith is this: your life is not about you. You're not in control. This is not your project. Rather, you are part of God's great design. To believe this in your bones and to act accordingly is to have faith. He says, when we operate out of this transformed vision, amazing things can happen. For we have surrendered to a power already at work within us that can do infinitely more than we can ask or imagine. Even a tiny bit of faith makes an extraordinary difference. Philippians 4:13, I have the strength for everything through him who empowers me. So here's a little bit about myself. My name is Father Bill Roush. I was born and raised in Conesville, Iowa, a small farming community between Columbus Junction and Nichols, Iowa. I'm the son of William Edward and Elma Grace Roush. I have one sister, Patty, and a brother, Daryl. I graduated from Columbus High School in Columbus Junction, Iowa in 1971. I attended Muscatine Community College, graduating with an AA degree, and continuing my education later in life, getting my BA degree from Cardinal Stritch University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my Master's of Divinity from the Sacred Heart School of Theology in Hales Corners, Wisconsin in 2015. I worked at my dad's service station, where I started helping out when I was 12 years old. Back then, a service station was just that. It was a true service station. We cleaned out the interior of every car that my dad serviced and washed the windows inside and out. I worked in that service station business for my dad and in another service station business in Columbus Junction at Cecil Standard while attending community college. I started working for Monsanto Company at the Muscatine plant in 1975. My life was not always fun. My parents had their problems. My dad lost his parents as a child, his mother in an auto accident when he was a toddler, and his father died of MS when he was in the 8th grade. He didn't have a role model when it came to family or being a father. My parents had many knockdown, drag-out fights. I remember my mom taking us kids to stay with an aunt and uncle in Muscatine on several occasions. During many of these situations, the fear of divorce hung over our heads. Many times, one parent or the other would ask which one I would choose to live with. Somehow, I always seemed to find my way to the local Methodist church. It was always unlocked. I would sit for what seemed to be hours in front of the altar. I felt I could always find solace in the silence with God. My parents never attended church, but encouraged my brother, sister, and I to attend every Sunday. My faith, somehow in silence, always brought me home to God. Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You have only to keep still. In 1997, I lost the love of my life to breast cancer, leaving me to raise our 2 beautiful daughters, Elizabeth and Jeanette. who were 9 and 7 years old at the time. Both are now married and starting families of their own. Elizabeth married Matthew Hepworth, and they have a new little baby girl, Eileen Francis, and they live in Cedar Rapids. And Jeanette married Roush-Krafka, and they also have a new little girl, Liv Knight. Yes, I am so blessed. I've become a grandpa twice in about a month this last year. At Monsanto back in 1975, I started on the floor and worked my way to OSHA process safety management. After 25 years there, I accepted a separation package from Monsanto and started a couple of small businesses with a close friend, Dick Schwab. One was building apple cider presses, and the other was a laser engraving business. Making that life change was one of the most difficult decisions that I've ever made. The day after the offer was expiring, I was on my way home, and a voice popped into my head. What are your daughters going to remember you for? The money that you leave behind, or the time that you spend with them? I turned around, went back to Monsanto, accepted the offer, a decision I never regretted in my life. During my time with Dick Schwab, I also helped build 8 barns, including the much heralded Celebration Barn between Iowa City and Solon. In 2008, I answered the call to the priesthood and was ordained a priest in 2015. I served as a parochial vicar with Father Marty Getz for 3 years in Burlington, Iowa, and have been in Riverside as pastor for the past 4 years with the cluster parishes, now Holy Family Parish. My wife Cindy and I have both been very involved in community life all the way through, our parents leading us by example. Cindy and her mother were very active Boy and Girl Scout leaders and organizers. Dorothy, Cindy's mother, was a registered World War II nurse and a very knowledgeable lady. She gave many talks about life and scouting adventures to many organizations, sharing her faith journey. As a result, my wife Cindy was also very involved in scouting, so much so that at one time she was even asked to be on the National Board of Directors for the Scouts. She declined, realizing she could not give the position the attention required with 2 young daughters at home. Prior to our marriage, I held positions as a Boy Scout leader, youth minister, and I was on the board of directors for the Methodist Church, where the youth under my supervision remodeled the church basement for a multi-purpose space. I was also a Conesville Council member, volunteer firefighter, and Monsanto emergency team member. I was certified as an emergency medical technician, a CPR trainer and instructor. I was also a member of the Columbus Junction Junior Chamber of Commerce and the JCs. Cindy graduated from Columbine High School in Pueblo, Colorado, and received her BA degree from Colorado State University. She joined the Peace Corps for 2 years and acquired her PhD from the University of Minnesota in educational psychology. Cindy worked for the University of Iowa at the Evaluation and Exam Service, and being the giving person she was, sent part of her monthly salary to a family in the Philippines that she had met in the Peace Corps. Cindy and I met in Conesville, Iowa, during Melon Day celebration held there. She was invited by a coworker to participate in the festivities, which included a fun run that I was coordinating. I received her contact information off of the fun run application materials, with her permission, of course. She intrigued me from the very beginning. She was the only female participant in the fun run. She came in last place, but ended up number 1 in my life. She was so polite. Everything started with please and ended with thank you. And a God bless you was always a response you expected to hear from her anytime she would hear a sneeze. She never left a place but it wasn't cleaner than it was when she found it. When we would vacation with her parents, I felt that we needed to bring rubber gloves along because Cindy and her mother were always picking up trash off of the streets and in the parks that we'd visited. They were true scouts. Cindy led our daughters in Girl Scouts after we were married. She was a co-PTA president for Lemmy Elementary. She was a member of the Area Educational Research Association, taught statistics at the University of Iowa, and worked at the University of Iowa Evaluation and Exam Service the whole time we were married. Cindy also taught religious education at Regina and still had time to volunteer with children's liturgy while raising our daughters. Cindy and I rarely missed the Sunday at St. Mary's. After having attended for a couple of years, we realized that we weren't asked to volunteer, participate. We finally decided we needed to be proactive in this situation, and we asked Sister Agnes if we could help in any way. Our first opportunity was hospitality during coffee hour. The rest is history. During coffee hour, we had the ability to meet and greet many of the parishioners and introduce ourselves, and we got involved in other ministries as time progressed. This is where we met Dan and their family on our faith journey with St. Mary's. And as I said, it just continued to escalate from there. As I indicated, Cindy started teaching religious education, volunteering with children's liturgy, and eventually I started assisting her with religious education classes. After Cindy's death, I continued to teach Jeanette's class until she reached the 9th grade and was confirmed. I continued teaching that class before confirmation until I started seminary. After Cindy's death, I realized how important volunteering was. I joined the Knights of Columbus and eventually became Grand Knight of Council 842. The funeral luncheon ladies provided food and served a church full of guests after Cindy's funeral, and it was here that I noticed that someone had to set up and take down tables and chairs in the parish hall after every event. I was excited to take on that duty as well, now continued by Mark and Rosemary. St. Mary's Parish was very supportive to our family during Cindy's illness and death. Sister Agnes shared with my daughters that she too had lost her mom at a very young age. I cannot count the ways and times Sister Agnes, Patty McTaggart, Father Ken, and the staff here helped us through the most difficult time in our lives. Cindy's mother, Dorothy, was also a true blessing for us. She came and stayed with us for long periods of time, often for months at a time. She was accepted into the St. Mary's Church community as if she were a member. In fact, at the time of her passing, we had a special memorial service for her here at St. Mary's because there were so many people here that knew and loved her. She always said that I was her rock, yet I knew it was the other way around. Many people have asked, Father Bill, how did you make the decision to enter the priesthood? Which brings me to another scripture reading. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will remain. So whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. John 15:16. And he goes on to say, this I command you, love one another. Over the years, I have come to know that it is only in giving do we receive. I have innately known this all along. My wife only verified this for me through her faith journey over and over again. There is not one thing that made me decide, but a multitude of things that made me discern. God chooses all of us, including me, as unworthy as I am. When we were told that Cindy's liver was shutting down and her veins were collapsing, she looked at me and said, "You don't have any doubts, do you?" I responded, "Not if you don't." That's true faith, allowing God to control your destiny without questioning. After my wife's passing, I needed to be around people. It was during this time, at coffee hour, Tim Sullivan asked me to join him at a CEW. From there, I met Sister Laura and eventually became a CEW board member and joined the Stewardship and Evangelization Commission. It was at a dinner meeting with the Stewardship and Evangelization Commission that I shared with Father Ken Kuntz that Jeanette was graduating high school, my youngest child was leaving for college, and I didn't know what I was going to do with the empty nest syndrome that was about to engulf me. He simply asked, "Have you ever considered the seminary?" St. Mary's has, as long as I can remember, been very inspirational when it comes to vocations. Father Jeff Belger also had an influence in my call as well. He had a small laser engraving project he needed done, so we were riding out to the shop together when I shared with him that I was discerning my call. I shared that I couldn't stop thinking about it and was continually asking myself, is this what God wants me to be doing with my life right now? I was waiting for a sign like a lightning strike or a ball bat alongside the head from God. He said, if my continual thinking about it and not being able to get it out of my head wasn't a sign, he didn't know what one was. God speaks to us all of the time, yet we fail to listen. Mark 4:9 says, whoever has ears ought to hear. We need to listen. It was while I was setting up chairs in the church basement for the diaconate scrutinies team to meet that I recognized I could continue volunteering the way I have been as a deacon, and I could also continue working. I shared this with Father Ken and Bishop Amos. Both wanted me to discern the priesthood. They wanted me to recognize that the diaconate was not a stepping stone, that once ordained a permanent deacon, I could not change my vocation. After being an aspirant for the diaconate ministry for 1 year, I realized I was only answering half of the call and shared my concern again with the bishop. Bishop Amos then recommended that I go visit Sacred Heart School of Theology in Hales Corner, Wisconsin. I had a second cousin that lived in West Bend, Wisconsin, just 45 minutes north of there. So I took the girls, and they spent the night with my cousin and joined me at Sacred Heart the following day. On our way home, both girls almost simultaneously said they could see me there. The first thing I knew, we were all acquiring our BA degrees at the same time. My daughters were posting my grades on the refrigerator door. Our faith journey is just that. It's allowing your life path to be guided by God in faith. That is, His Word, His gospel, and recognizing that. It is by following Jesus' example that our cups are filled. Being there in service to God and our brothers and sisters in Christ is only in giving of God's love and sharing it with others that our cup can be filled and overflowing with his grace. Listen to him and let him guide your faith journey. His miracle started at the wedding feast of Cana. The scripture from John 5 says it all, when John explains what the Virgin Mary told the servers. Do whatever he tells you. Our cup is continually filled through him. It is up to us to share that cup with those around us. And with that, I'll let Jeanette share her version of the story, and trust me, she's a lot more exciting to listen to than I am.
Sorry about the chaos earlier. Our daughter's a little loud. Unlike the family my dad grew up in, he made sure that our upbringing was different. We were a perfect family of 4 for a while. I don't have many memories of that time, but the ones I do have are precious. We were happy and wholesome. We traveled the world together and actually liked spending time with one another. I'm sure we had our issues, but I can't recall any of them. We all seemed to complement each other perfectly, but it seemed like my mom was the glue. She was kind, empathetic, patient, and a wonderful listener, though I'm not sure what I had to say at 7 that merited listening to with great attention and enthusiasm, but she was always there to hear us out. When she passed, we lost our glue. For a while, it felt like we were in free fall. My grandmother stayed with us for a while, and we grieved together. Her fierce love helped us heal. When we lost my grandmother 6 years later, it was our community of faith that we turned to that helped us grieve and heal. Faith became our glue, and this community has been instrumental in our discernment and the choices that we've made. I've attended St. Mary's since birth. I had my first communion here, experienced my first reconciliation here, was confirmed here, and was married here. We served coffee and donuts here as kids, and we helped set up tables and chairs for different events, and today I work here. I help coordinate and format our quarterly newsletter. My husband and I were a part of Cornerstone here for 2 years and attended Mass regularly here prior to COVID. St. Mary's is like a second home for me. I met one of my best friends here. St. Mary's parishioners are like family. Though unfortunately, like family, I don't know most of you as well as I ought to. We hope that these Faith Journeys talks can help us get to know each other and bring us closer together. My portion of the talk focuses mainly on our discernment and the instrumental role of this faith community. Dad and I discerned in parallel. When Dad mentions he was debating the priesthood, I admit there was a selfish part of me that wanted to keep him to myself. I think Else and I both felt that way a little bit. But we also knew my dad. He's always been a busybody, and we knew that being an empty nester on his own wouldn't be good for him. We knew he felt this calling, and it would be best for him, his mental health, and ultimately the community of faith if he followed it. As he discerned the diaconate and the priesthood, I discerned college and Catholicism in general. I was desperate for connection. I wanted the close-knit community of the evangelical church my friends went to. But I also loved the symbolism and the deep-rooted history prevalent in our Catholic traditions. In college at UNI, my best friend, Bethany Feigl, convinced me to go with her to St. Stephen's and encouraged me to go on a retreat. There, I found the close-knit community I was so desperate for. As I strove for my bachelor's degree in biology and my minor in creative writing at UNI, I found home at St. Stephen's the Witness Catholic Student Center. I spent most of my waking hours there and made some of the best friends I have to this day. I organized and led countless retreats and became the president of our stewardship commission. After college, as Dad was going into seminary, I was discerning the Peace Corps. I felt called to action, to do more, to be the change I wanted to see in the world. I also felt a desperate need to be closer to and better understand the woman my mother was. I knew acts of service and her time in Peace Corps Saipan were formative for her, so I wanted to share that experience with her. The spring after college, I was accepted into Peace Corps Mozambique. While I prepared myself for staging in September, I worked for a family friend, Dick Schwab, on his farm. One day, he asked me to help him at his sawmill, along with a man named Dan Krafka. We worked for a while and took a break and were chatting in the shade under a tree. Dick told Dan that I was going into the Peace Corps. Dan looked excited and said, "My son Ryan is in the Peace Corps in Mozambique." It clicked then that I knew Ryan. We had been praying for his family for quite a while. His mother had recently passed away from breast cancer. I had worked with Ryan the summer of my freshman year of college. He had helped me finish cider presses a few times. We ate lunch together most days that summer, and though neither of us said much, I had quite a crush on him. I would find out much later that that crush was mutual. At the Peace Corps, at the time, Peace Corps served more than 70 countries. That we would both be placed in the same country was highly unlikely. In hindsight, I think our mothers conspired in heaven to unite us. I served as an English and biology teacher in Montepuez, Mozambique for 2 years. It was likely the most difficult job I will ever have, besides parenting, of course. Having to teach those subjects is difficult as it is, but teaching them with only a chalkboard, no background in teaching, in Portuguese, a language I had only just learned, and the second or third language to most of my students, to classes of 50 to over 100 middle school and high school students at a time, was very challenging. I learned a lot during those couple of years, probably more than my students did, if I'm honest. I learned about the injustices so many people face. I learned what true community looks like. I learned that I need much less than I think I do. I learned that I could live without running water or electricity. I learned that poverty and depression are not synonymous. Though I was in one of the most poverty-stricken countries in the world, they had a tighter-knit community than I had ever experienced. Mozambicans truly believed that what was theirs, they were given to share. For better or worse, nothing was off limits. I had never experienced such generosity before, and to find that in the midst of poverty was astounding to me. That first year in Peace Corps, though I was surrounded by friends, I felt terribly lonely, which wasn't helped by the anti-malarial prophylaxis we were given, which had the side effect of depression. I felt I lacked something deeper than superficial friendship. I was missing my home, my community of faith. Right when I felt most lost, that community of faith found me in the form of 3 missionary families from Arkansas who had been serving the community of Montepuez since 2003. They still serve in Montepuez to this day, almost 20 years since they started. They offered me belonging through shared faith and community, which I had been desperately missing. They also reminded me that our greatest gift as Christians is the love Christ taught us, and how we use our gifts and talents to put that love into action. During my second year of Peace Corps, I learned to love more deeply than I had ever previously experienced beyond family. Ryan and I started dating while I was on winter break after my first year of Peace Corps. He had finished Peace Corps a year before me, so he was home to stay, but I had another year yet to go. So we dated long distance, over 9,000 miles away, as the crow flies, with an 8-hour time difference. It was trying, but good for a relationship. We wrote each other emails, Skyped, started movies at the same time, and texted throughout. Our communication then was probably more frequent than it is now. Its frequency would astonish anyone who knows how quiet Ryan is. That communication was all we had, and we built our foundation of our relationship on it. We had planned to see each other next when I came home for my dad's ordination in June, but Ryan surprised me by showing up on my doorstep in Montepuez on my birthday. It was the greatest surprise I've ever experienced, and such an extraordinary act of love. Together, we traveled to Spain and surprised my dad as he finished his journey on the Camino de Santiago at Santiago de Compostela. We all then traveled home and were able to celebrate Dad's ordination together. I returned to Montepuez for the remainder of my service, and together Ryan and I planned to surprise my dad when I came home after finishing my service. We showed up for Mass in Burlington one Sunday, then waited in line to shake hands with my dad on our way out. For a moment, my dad didn't even recognize me. It was the most surprised I think I've ever seen him. While Dad was a priest in Burlington, I was discerning medical school. I got certified as an EMT, became a phlebotomist, took my final prerequisite courses, but ultimately decided medical school wasn't for me. I wanted to practice medicine one day to be able to become a doctor for Doctors Without Borders, but I was skeptical of the US healthcare system and lacked the fortune it would take to get through school, so I decided to change routes. It took quite a bit of discernment to decide what to do instead, but the love of God speaks through our loved ones, and our faith and our family of faith helped guide me along my journey. Ryan and I were married by my dad right here in this very church. It was one of the best days of my life. So many of our loved ones were here supporting us, it almost felt as though we had died and gone to heaven. Soon after our wedding, Father Steve approached me about coordinating and formatting our quarterly newsletter. I was initially hesitant to accept because I didn't have any background in journalism, but Father Steve was persistent, and eventually I acquiesced. Ryan also had a lifelong dream of being a professional woodworker with his own business, so I decided to support him in his endeavor by doing his marketing and finishing. Meanwhile, Dad got placed as pastor of the cluster parishes in Riverside, so we're close enough to see each other regularly and provide moral support for each other when necessary, which has been much more often for me recently. On November 2nd, 2021, on the 24th anniversary of my mother's death, which is also All Souls Day and Dia de los Muertos, our daughter Liv was born. On a day so plagued with the remembrance of death, we found the greatest joy we've ever experienced in our daughter, whose name means life. My sister Elspeth and her husband welcomed their daughter Eileen into the world just 1 month later. Though our daughter will never experience the joys of having grandmothers, she has wonderful grandfathers, a loving family, and a loving faith community to compensate. I admit that it's been difficult to share my father and Liv's grandfather with so many others as we learn to become parents. But through my dad and the church, we've gained a greater community of faith who have helped and supported us with meals and showered Liv with gifts as though they were her own flesh and blood. For that, we are forever grateful, and we look forward to watching that community grow as she does. Thank you all for your love and support, and for making it out to spend this lovely afternoon with us.
I'd like to thank Father Bill and Jeanette for that wonderful presentation, sharing your faith journey with us. I forgot in my introduction I was going to share another story about Father Bill. My mother lives in Kelowna, and so when I go to visit her, I go through Riverside all the time. And once in a while, I'm in need of celebrating the sacrament of confession, you know. And I go to confession whenever I need to. I have 8 priests on speed dial, okay? So I'm driving back home through Riverside and I think, maybe Father Bill's available. So I go up to St. Mary's. He wasn't at the office, but she said, the secretary said, I think he's over at the house. So I went to the house and knocked on the door. Father Bill was there, and he heard my confession and he gave me absolution. And so there I was, a brand new creation in Christ, thanks to Father Bill. And Father Bill said, well, what are you doing now? I said, well, I got to get back to Iowa City because I have an article due for the newsletter for Jeanette, and she needs it by the end of today, and I haven't gotten it together, so I'm really nervous about that. But Jeanette's a wonderful editor of the St. Mary's newsletter. We're really blessed to have her helping out with that. We'd like to have a few minutes of Q&A, so if you two don't mind coming back up to the microphone and answering some questions, and then take your evaluation form downstairs to turn it in for a cookie at the end of the day, about 10 minutes from now. So, and could we meet your granddaughter too, Father Bill? I mean, eventually we'd just like to have her come into the picture too. Kirk Phillips is up there recording this.
I was fortunate enough to have my wife as my sponsor on her deathbed. There was special permission requested, I think, to make that happen. And so we got confirmed just before she passed in 1997. It's awesome. I don't know that that being a priest makes it any different than just being a grandfather, other than I probably don't have the time to share with her that I'd like to. Yeah, they're trying to decide what to call me, whether it's Grandpa Father Bill or... Yeah, her baptism is coming up April 3rd with her cousin. Father Steve and I. I'm going to share that duty. Father Steve and I, we were actually in seminary for a little while together, and our stories are very similar in that he'd lost his wife as well. So we have a lot in common, and we bonded at seminary and became very good friends, as well as co-workers together in Christ. And I think Liv considers him grandpa too, so it's only fair.
Any other questions?
Yep. 2015. 2015, yes. I remember that.
Any final questions?
Boy, we must have covered everything.
You do a great job. Thank you again for coming out on this beautiful day. Do come back on Wednesday the 30th to hear Father Samuel Hakim talk about Venerable Father Samuel Mazzucchelli. And again, a reminder, the next night, Dr. Tim Millay will be giving his presentation on the Journeys in Faith series at St. Wenceslas on March 31st. So do go downstairs for the reception, and thank you again for coming.